never knew that. Okay, thank you. That's
now you know why.
Cubensis. You want to say hello or start it up?
Hi. I already introduced myself at the beginning of the film, so I'm going to pass the mic down so the other panelists can introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Ashley Booth. I am the founder of the AWARE Project, which is the Southern California Psychedelics Society. I'm also a co-founder of Interspace Integration, which is an psychedelic integration and support program. And I'm also the co-founder of the brand new California Center for Psychedelic Therapy. So I wear a lot of hats, and I'm excited to be here and answer questions and discuss things.
Hi, my name is Brad Adams. I'm the founder of the Los Angeles Medicinal Plant Society, also in Los Angeles. We meet once a month, usually the first Sunday of the month. And I was also the chair of the planning committee for the Los Angeles Psychedelic Science Symposium, which happened last year at UCLA, and it's going to happen again next year at the Ace Theater in July. So stay tuned for that.
I have another one right here, except it's tangled around here. Hi, I'm Marisa. I'm a filmmaker with a doc series called The Healing Powers of Psychedelics and Other Mindful Practices. It's coming out on Gaia TV next year, so you can stream it on your TVs. I'm also the founder of the Psychedelic Leadership Summits. So we've been bringing together leaders and people who want to help lead and help usher in this movement into the mainstream. And we've been having one-day conferences before all the big conferences. So maybe our next one's before your big conference.
Thank you.
One other thing, I'm sorry, I also am a member of the AWARE Project and a quiet member of all these other amazing, local psychedelic societies we have here.
Hi, my name is Ryan Madevar. I'm the campaign director for Decriminalize California, and we're the group that's trying to basically decriminalize psychedelic mushrooms for personal cultivation, use, transport, the ability to give it away, and set up a regulatory system in some fashion that isn't absurd like it is with cannabis. And yeah, these are some fantastic people up here. By the way, I have a special request from Tyler, the director of the film. If you could take your phones out and go to the Internet Movie Database, it's imdb.com, and actually leave a review of the film that actually helps it get picked up for distribution for streaming services and whatnot.
And then go to check in on Facebook, realrecoveryfilmfestival.org. Okay, go ahead.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm sort of speaking as a representative for them. I've seen this movie now 8 times. I was in the premiere in Denver, and then we helped promote in LA and San Francisco and Santa Cruz, and there's a whole host of interesting questions that we get thrown at us. So the easiest way to do this, honestly, is does anyone have any questions? Because I show up for the Q&As not to hear myself talk, but to actually get bombarded by questions. So let's go for it.
Is marijuana considered a psychedelic?
It can be. It has low psychedelic properties. If you do enough of it, you can certainly trip. And if you were to do, for example, an edible and do some absurd number, if you were to make a mistake of like 350 milligrams, yeah, you're gonna be hugging a trash can and seeing quite a few interesting things.
I remember years ago I was doing LSD and I thought, I love this experience very much, but it's unlikely that I can do acid every day. So I made the decision to smoke pot every day for the rest of my life. Luckily, my car drove me to a rehab 25 years ago, and I saw that I could go a month without getting high, and I never got high again.
Well, I don't know if I should be cracking any drug group jokes in this room, but like, I personally love weed. It's like one of my all-time favorite substances. And interestingly enough, when it comes to psychedelics in this regard, psilocybin is actually something like, let's say you were to start out a weekend and you were at a festival and you wanted to do a proper dose and you took 3.5 milligrams and you had a really good time, and then Saturday you wanted to get that same level of effect, you'd actually have to up the dose to about 5 to 7 grams of this. And then if you were to try to do the same level the next day, you would have almost no effect. So it actually is an anti-addictive substance. You build up a very quick tolerance for it, so you need to have a buffer period of anywhere from 3 to 5 days before you can get that same level of an effect. So it doesn't meet a lot of the standard requirement as far as the definitions are concerned for a drug. It's more a substance that just has some very unique properties.
I have another question.
Oh, I was going to say something about cannabis as well. There's a group out of Boulder, Colorado, with Daniel Queen, and his group is called Medicinal Mindfulness. And what they've been doing is bringing cannabis into a ceremonial context, or using cannabis along with supportive guidance to create a space that's like, it's using cannabis as a psychedelic and treating it as a psychedelic, and allowing people to go through a legal, mind-altering experience. And it can be, if people are interested in diving into psychedelics but they don't know where to start, and they don't know, this can be a really good way to explore what it means to go through a preparation process, go through kind of a ceremonial process, or some kind of therapeutic process, and then have an integration process at the end. And so it can be a really great template to be able to experience what this kind of stuff is like without having to do something illegal. So we have several people in Los Angeles that have been trained in this method. Several of them are listed on Interspace Integration, but it's a pretty profound context to be able to experience cannabis in a completely different way.
And how often, and for what amount of time would that process, in other words, could you do that every day of your life?
No, it would be the idea of having like a profound experience that you would have. Maybe you only have it once. Maybe you do it once a year. Maybe you do it. It's not.
I
It
want to
wouldn't.
have a profound experience every day.
Well, if you have one
Why
that's
not?
deeply profound enough, maybe, then you'll have a while you'll need a while to chew on it.
Yeah, digest.
Integration.
Okay, question from the audience. Gentleman in the back.
Is there any benefit to doing ibogaine as opposed to doing a full iboga experience, all the alkaloids?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. Go for it.
The catch-all. So I used to work at an iboga, or an ibogaine clinic in Tijuana. So iboga has, I think, 13 different alkaloids. Ibogaine is one of the ones that's predominantly psychoactive, and it's shorter acting, so they tend to use it more for addiction treatment because it is shown to be for its anti-addictive properties. People that do iboga, the whole plant, tend to, the effectiveness doesn't seem to be all that different, but having the whole plant, people tend to feel more connected to the plant aspect of it rather than just the effects of the experience. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
I would actually like to throw one extra bit on there, though. Could you talk a little bit about what the cardiac issues are sometimes associated with the use of iboga?
Yeah, so it can lower your heart rate to dangerous levels, and so that's why it's really important to stay, or to be doing this kind of work, especially with people that are struggling with addiction under medical care. But there haven't been that many deaths, even though there is that risk. But it's mostly been around people that have had other types of complications, or they've been in detox like you saw, but maybe snuck in some heroin into their bag and then did it while they're still on iboga. And so there have been a couple of, there's a researcher down in San Diego that has looked at the situations where those people have died. He gave a talk at Lamps a couple years ago. And so, but it can be, so it's really important to monitor the person's heart rate and make sure that their liver is in good health to be able to process the medicine.
Cool. Next question.
Is there any benefit in doing this if you're not on opioids? Like people that aren't struggling with addiction, do they experience ibogaine or use it by any means?
The Weedy people use it as part of their rites of passage and tradition, so it's built into their culture. So, Weedy with a B. So they seem to use it quite often, and there's a whole spiritual practice that goes with it. So yeah, they get a benefit from that as it is.
Yeah, I tried it down in Costa Rica, and I wasn't trying to get off anything. I was going for a psycho-spiritual reboot, which a lot of people are doing, and it was a very profound experience, a very hard to explain, but I feel like I got a lot of benefit from it. So it's becoming more popular for people experiencing it just for a psycho-spiritual reboot.
There's also been some research to show that it, because the prohibition has also shut down all the research. So there have been like a few studies that have shown that ibogaine can also be helpful for other types of neurological diseases like Parkinson's, because it's resetting the serotonin and dopamine systems. And so we need to be able to open the research back up again and fund the research so that we can find out all these uses. I also have a case study where I had a friend who had Tourette's and OCD, and he did 10 days of low-dose iboga, and he no longer has tics, and he no longer suffers from the Tourette's or the OCD. So we need more research.
Wasn't John Hopkins just given millions of dollars last week to study psychedelics?
So Johns Hopkins, I believe it was at the beginning of September, announced the opening of their new Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research. They're mainly going to be working with psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, as everyone saw in the film. And so they're going to be looking at anorexia, possibly Alzheimer's. They've been working on addiction for quite some time. Psilocybin has shown a lot of promise in treating. I think they've mostly been working with smoking at Johns Hopkins, but NYU has done research into psilocybin and alcoholism. The University of Alabama is doing psilocybin and cocaine addiction, and I believe that they're studying something else at the University of Madison too. I can't remember which addiction that is. Does anybody remember? But
my question is, the gal was talking about the benefits or after the treatment having the microdosing with yoga. What are the benefits of using the microdose someone who's having addiction?
I just want to really also emphasize that these medicines, these tools can be really great for expanding consciousness. And so microdosing or taking a full dose is there's an allegory of a white snowy hilltop. Actually, that your thoughts are, if you're looking at a big hill, that your thoughts are like the deep woven rivers on the hill, and then you have thought patterns that are constantly driven deeper and deeper every time you have a thought pattern. Sometimes we call these loops. And so working with ibogaine, for example, or iboga is like a big snowfall that completely wipes the slate clean and allows you to consciously start over. So I wanted to say this because somebody earlier asked about this experience. So, if this isn't something as big as a mental crisis or a severe addiction, but it is something that I think a lot of people can relate to. And really this idea that we want to medicalize this limits the way we look at these tools. These tools can also really be helped to optimize and expand consciousness and develop a deeper spiritual connection, which so many people see just enhances your quality of life. So as far as microdosing goes, I don't know, sorry.
And I was just saying, how does this play into, what's the difference between this and just some really pure LSD 25 at any dose?
I really want to do a Healing Powers episode on ibogaine. I haven't done it yet, so I can't personally speak. I do know that it's like 24 to 36 hours long. Ibogaine or iboga. It's a very intense experience. And LSD is 12. LSD you can still function at a festival. Ibogaine you want a heart monitor and you want some pretty.
But I'm saying the ultimate experience for the consciousness
so
improvement. Is it any different?
They actually work.
In other words, why can't we just use acid?
There's some different receptors in the brain. So LSD and the classical psychedelics, psilocybin, mescaline, LSD, they all work on the serotonin receptors in the brain, and that provides a particular type of experience. The experience that you're going to have on most of those at a high enough dose is going to be pretty similar, but the other psychedelics that are less classical, such as ibogaine, which works on the opiate receptors, and ketamine, which works on the glutamate receptors, at least that's their best guess for how it's working right now, provide a completely different type of experience. So if you go really high dose LSD, you're gonna kind of go to a different place in your mind than where she's going on ibogaine.
Well, we all love
Question back here.
Is it, okay, question, and then I have a, no, go ahead, what's the question?
What really caught my attention was for Iboga or Ibogaine, is it like 100% the statistics that there's no physical withdrawal? Or because me being an addict myself, that's one thing that really held me back is the actual experience of withdrawal. It's really unexplainable. It's kind of like, so I've done many, I kind of like related to that lady, you know?
Yeah.
But I
It's-
guess my question is it like some people, do they really like not feel anything, or do they feel something, like some people like you need another experience?
I don't remember exactly the statistics, but it is high that people get off of it or are able to detox with minimal withdrawals. The biggest factor that we saw at Crossroads was not that people didn't detox properly, but that they go back into their life and not have a supportive environment, or were they going back into an environment where they weren't supported and they weren't able to use again. So you saw how much help she was getting. You know, therapeutics developed, all these people in her life supporting her, all of these therapists and nurses and everybody making sure that she was psychologically supported so that she had the tools to be able to handle all of the feelings that were coming up through this whole experience, so that she wouldn't use again as a way to
Default.
self-medicate.
Yeah.
So that's more of the issue.
The groundwork.
I just want to add too that, I mean, what has come up in people who are using this treatment is they have to be really, really ready themselves.
Right.
It can't be somebody else being like twisting their arm and being like, go, 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 you need this. And they have to be ready to be done with it.
There's a question down there, in the first row on the right.
I read at the end of the movie that Clear Sky Recovery. Where is that located, and do they use this Iboga and Ibogaine?
Clear Sky does use ibogaine detox. I believe they're in the Caribbean. Oh, okay. So, yeah, it's not in the United States, but it's either in Cancun or in the Caribbean.
I bet if you write the filmmakers, if you go to their Facebook page or the website and inquire, they'll have all that information for you.
A very interesting film.
Let's everybody hear. Or,
Sorry?
yeah.
It was a very interesting film. My personal experience of using psychedelics and also marijuana is that it's made my mental health worse. I had 4 trips over one summer. The last one was very bad, one on mushrooms, and then 2 months later, I had my first episode of severe breakdown of severe depression and anxiety. So I would not take, I mean, I'm in recovery anyway, 13 years, for alcohol. I would not take anything psychoactive, but if I took anything like that, it would make me have a panic attack, and it would just it would destabilize my mood. I tried ketamine as well, and that made me feel like I was on a really bad trip as well. What would you say to that?
So the way that I've most often heard it explained is that the way that psychedelics work is they disrupt the rigidity of what's going on in your brain. And so if your brain is more toward the rigid side of thinking, and you've got OCD or addiction or depression or anxiety or that sort of thing, and you need to be kind of snapped out of a rut, that's what psychedelics can help with. But if you're already at a place where there's more kind of chaos in your system, or you're already feeling, a little more disorganized, it can send you the other direction. So it's definitely not for everyone. My personal experience, so you said you're in recovery from an alcohol addiction. So am I. And I was actually spontaneously cured of my alcohol addiction by a recreational psilocybin trip. I wasn't intending to recover. I was partying up in the mountains with friends, and all of a sudden, something changed in me, and I was filled with more of myself than ever before. Basically, the hole that had been inside of me that I'd been trying to fill with alcohol, mushrooms helped me fill it with myself. But it doesn't work that way for everyone. These are definitely not medicines for everyone, and they have different effects for different people.
How long were you sober?
About 15 months.
I could talk about drugs all night. I'm probably gonna take one or two more questions. I have one. At the end, when she had the birthday cake with the candle, when she had the birthday cake with the candle, and she said it was a year sober, does that mean without any IBO, any drugs whatsoever?
Well, I think it was heroin free or opium free.
If she's been sober from opioids for 19 months.
Sober from opioids, but not necessarily other.
Psychedelic mushrooms.
She still did mushrooms, so she wasn't like traditionally what.
Not pure abstinence.
Not abstinence, just off the drug that was killing her. Okay, that's great.
I was going to say one other piece here because I think you bring up a really important point. This is that sometimes if you're struggling with an addiction or a mental health issue and you do psychedelics unsupported, it can be very destabilizing. So doing it with someone that is a clinical professional, which is why we're trying to do research to be able to get this available for people to do in a safe context, and doing it with someone that knows about those mental health issues, whether it be addiction or something else. So I understand that, and your story is not unique. There people do get very destabilized with these things. So even though we're sharing all this and sharing these beautiful stories, and we do want to promote the benefits of this, we do want to speak with prudence.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that too. I mean, it's a very good point, and that's something that, in the beginning of the Renaissance, we've always pushed the positive aspects of psychedelics, and which for good reason, because there's very powerful, as you can see. But there's also, every yin has a yang. There's an opposite pole to that, and that's something that I think needs to come out a little bit more. And that's something that we're going to look at a little bit more with the next psychedelic conference, is looking at the more negative or more harmful aspects, possible harmful aspects, because they're not all completely safe for everyone, and it's kind of been underplayed a little bit in terms of what's been coming out in the press and so forth. And we want to have more of a balanced approach to that. So it's a very good point. And
People are doing it in the UK, microdosing with psychedelic for depression.
There's a hand.
And right here as well.
And here as well.
Yeah.
One last thing to add on that point, because it should be said more often. If anyone has a pre-existing condition of like a personality disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar is a little on the fence. That psychedelics are not really. We don't endorse them. Yeah, there's like some very marginal cases where you've heard it might be okay, but very, 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 very unlikely. We don't have enough research. Please don't mix, and also don't mix if you are on SSRIs. So.
In the blue, the light blue right there.
Me? Oh, yes. If somebody wanted to go and have a monitored, professional experience, now with mushroom in Los Angeles, is there a place where we know I've been trying to find a place for a very long time, and here you guys all are. I mean, what? But what?
It's currently illegal. And so there's no above ground things.
So how do we find out?
Talk to them afterwards.
Okay, will you be around?
Please do not ask. Please do not come to any of our events and ask people where to do stuff underground. We try and create a safe space. because we're still in the age of prohibition, right? And I know that there are people that are hungry for this work, but we don't know if they're underground cops. There could be informants. You could be incriminating yourself or incriminating others. So it's a dangerous. The best thing that we can do right now is to fight for more research and for legalization and decriminalization.
Yeah, if you want to find out what's going on in terms of research for above ground, legal ways of doing it, you can check out clinicaltrials.org, and it'll you can type in psilocybin or whatever, and you can see what's going on in the country.
And please don't underestimate the power of community.
That's
Don't
what.
talk about it here, but make friends. Talk about it elsewhere, please.
Not to self-incriminate, but one of the things the campaign is doing, we actually teach classes
That's so
on
sad.
how to grow psychedelic mushrooms. So basically, for the cost of about $125, a person can grow enough psychedelic mushrooms for themselves, their significant other, their family, their friends, their annoying neighbor lady that they want tomatoes from for a year in a closet. So there's an entire process for how to do it, and if you really want to learn, community is great, but go to the internet and just look up YouTube videos, because there's millions of them there too if you want to be safe.
Oh, one last note, really quick, I'm so sorry. We're actually doing a mixer, a networking, speed dating, psychedelic mixer with the Aware Project on 11/11 at a venue in WeHo called 11/11. So,
Can you remember that?
we aim to be catchy.
Yeah, I have a question about the decriminalization. Like, what is the best possible scenario after decriminalization? Saying that happens, could it happen the way it happened with cannabis, or is there a better way? What do you think?
God, I hope it doesn't happen the way it happened with cannabis. 'Cause that was a nightmare for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, it's
so the
horrible.
whole goal to basically legalize a substance is you wanted to have high quality, you wanted to be affordable, and you wanted a wide selection and easy access to it. So the problem with cannabis was basically they created this compounding tax system where they would cultivate, like the cultivators got hit with tax, the manufacturers got hit with the tax, people at the end of the point being distributed got hit with the tax, and they would just pass that all down to, and there's a lot of different ways they can call this, the patient, the customer, the average person out there. So what we're trying to do differently here is instead of creating like a hyper over-regulated tax system where there's like a sin tax locked on top of it as well, it basically, an average person can do this. It's treated like growing vegetables in your backyard. And if you wanted to actually have some kind of a commercial component for it, it would actually be attached to the California Department of Food and Agriculture. So it would actually be handled by the Ag Commission. So all the same standard operating procedures for growing regular mushrooms, in essence, gets applied to it to make sure there's no crazy extra weird additives to it, that it's actually the right percentage of what you're getting by weights and volume. And yeah, it basically eliminates all the components that honestly drive the black market. You take away all those incentives and people can actually do this. And for people, for example, that would want to go into a therapeutic session, they could now do that. But keep in mind, this would still only be basically legal at the state level. It's not legal at the federal level, and you still need to push for either rescheduling or what I hope for is a full descheduling. Because the beauty of psychedelic mushrooms, for example, it has like the lowest LD50 rate of any substance out there. You'd have to eat like 50 pounds of this stuff before your body would theoretically die from it. Does that mean you would do good things while you're on it? Some people make good decisions when they're on alcohol, and some people do not make good decisions on alcohol. Just saying.
Where was it recently legalized? Is that Oregon?
It was decriminalized in Denver with a citizens initiative, and then there was a city resolution in Oakland that passed for not just psilocybin, but all plant-based ethnogenetic plants, as well as fungus.
Right back there?
In the decriminalization movement, how do we make sure that people are educated on harm reduction and the importance of setting and dose? If anyone could be growing it and giving it to their neighbor, and there are potential risks in certain people who it might not be right for.
The difficulty of actually educating a population on what to do is one of the most difficult things you could ever try to pull off. For example, how do you educate kids not to do stupid things when they go and drink? That's a cultural phenomena that is unfortunately really bad in this country. If you go to Europe, for example, they'll actually give minors booze at the table, but they'll water it down and it'll be sort of under parental supervision because, they're just there, they're at dinner, and they take away a lot of the stigma of rebellion. Whereas here, the idea is, the moment you're 18, in fact, basically when you're younger than that, the easiest way to piss off people and rebel against your own society is to go do things in extreme amounts. And that's a cultural phenomenon that's really bad in the United States. There's some things we don't seem to care about. There's other things we care about in a far worse fashion. So the issue is basically, you first teach people what this is, so you demystify the entire process. By the way, there's actually a phenomenon known as mycophobia that's actually in the United States primarily. They just didn't understand what mushrooms were really like, and it originally came from a thought that they were actually poisonous, far more than they actually were afraid of it being a psychedelic experience. That's something that's going to change over the course of the next probably 2-3 decades in a drastic way. You'll see more mushrooms that are just regular edible gourmet ones that are out there. And I think the encouraging thing that's happening is there's actually a lot of fungus-style federations, mycological societies and groups that have been popping up, and they actually show people what this stuff is like. If you want to meet an amazing group of people, there's a couple of different ones. There's the San Diego Mycological Society, there's the Santa Cruz Fungus Federation, there's one in Los Angeles, and if you actually go and join them, you can learn what it's like. And they'll teach you a bunch of different things. They'll show you how to cook with these things, they'll show you how to properly go out in nature and forage for these things, and then if you talk to them on the sidelines, they're going to tell you what their experience is like. And by basically pushing a campaign like decriminalization, the entire goal is to educate people with as much money as possible that it takes. Yes?
And on the education end of things, I wanted to add that we're already starting to try to educate people as these things are coming more into the public awareness. That's why the AWARE project exists. That's part of the reason that Psychedelia Integration, which is the organization I'm most involved with, does educational events and integration circles. And it's true that there can be a lot of danger if people don't integrate properly and if they don't know what they're doing. So we're trying to sort of push to educate people on the front side and then integrate people on the back side. And so that means showing them tools for grounding themselves, for applying the lessons that they've learned, and figuring out how to change their lives based on the lessons that they get from the substances.
Also, one other big thing that's actually happening.
I'm going to take a question.
Hold on, I got to say this one other bit. If you really want to see how this is going down, the press is taking the lead on this in a huge way. So if you want to go see the latest 60 Minutes on psychedelic mushrooms,
Oh, it's awesome.
check it out. And they're going to spearhead.
Positive. All positive. Yeah.
This is the most positive thing happening in a very dark time in America.
You got it.
I just wanted to say, all this research, all this psychedelia, might be the antidote to the clouds that have overswept this country. I mean, this is the greatest movement. I'm glad I'm alive to still see this happening for everybody. And you guys are on the front lines and spreading the word, and we're just going to take like 2 or maybe 34 more questions. No, right here, yes.
Just earlier you mentioned deaths, and so I'm just wondering, with this Western use of iboga, do you guys know how many people have died, or like the ratio? I know that you said research has stopped, but
300 to 1. Yeah, it was like the guy who studied it was like there was like 18 or like.
Trevor Millar from MAPS Canada, he also runs one of the Apple Game clinics up there. He said it was basically something like less than 30 people in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
But what's going to end up happening though is that's because there hasn't really been much use of this.
I was going to ask,
So,
what's the ratio
right.
of people who use it and don't?
If there's an extraordinary explosion of people that start doing this, there's going to be definitely an increased rate of deaths associated with it. And a lot of it's circumstantial.
Do you know what the ratio is now of people who do use it versus who don't?
What do you mean, do you use it versus don't?
Just, you mentioned.
Somebody said there was like 1 out of 300, but there's a lot of these things that happen where people they're not recording it.
Yeah. Well, because with this increased interest in all of this, more and more providers are filling the vacuum with more or less training and skill set to be able to provide support. So the thing that we've all been advocating through our organizations is getting people the information on how they can make good choices, that if they do encounter someone that is a facilitator in the underground, what kind of questions should you be asking them? What kind of questions should you be asking yourself before you sit? What questions should they be asking you? So on the Aware project, we've created a safety section and a whole guide called the Sitting Safe Guide, and have all sorts of things to support people. If you are going to choose to go down this road in an underground way, how can you be safe in doing that? So check it out.
They also do cardiac screenings, and sometimes they actually have some of the cardiac gear there at the clinics as well. So, try to go with one that looks the most professional and legit out there. Like a hotel room where you meet someone online. So.
Do you guys ever use either personally or professionally DMT, LSD, and/or peyote?
I do all the time.
Really?
Awesome. Yeah. Each one has a different effect on you, but like to compare, for example, LSD to psilocybin, that's almost like you could think of listening to digital music on LSD versus analog version on psilocybin.
Wow, I really want your email, bro.
You got it. It's Ryan@decrimca.org.
Before schizophrenia, psychedelic.
Yeah, the LSD I think is better
So
for stereo.
to speak to that point, there was a study done that was published in Science, I'm not sure when, years ago, showing that psychedelics don't cause schizophrenia, but they can bring it to the surface if it's already there, or it can cause a break. So if you have a schizophrenia or bipolar in your family, it's very important to be very careful, if not maybe just avoid these, because you don't want to cause a break. But the paper was showing that it was from pre-existing conditions.
In my country, we have a lot of young black males who smoke a lot of dope and get.
Everybody needs to hear. Don't drop acid on a rooftop.
Oh.
Anyway,
Yeah.
we have a question in the back. Sorry. Yeah, didn't you have your hand up? Yes.
My question is in regards to, opioids in particular, are there any studies that are able to go on there, or is that not in the equation because it's not like federal? And obviously we want to learn more about these medicines and have
Again, first off, studies can actually be done. You can apply through the DEA. They have a program where if you want to study a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2, 3, or 4 on the list, there's a series of applications at the federal level, and then you also have to match off to it to what the actual state that you're in is. There is, I know, a separate conference coming up that people are putting together that's actually going to show a series of workshops. So if people actually want to do research on that, they can actually go through it. You do have to be attached to an accredited institute, and there's a whole bunch of paperwork you have to go. There's even like a patient's bill of rights where you have to disclose all the possibilities of what could happen if you were to do this that they know about. So you don't need to be locked into a specific city or county in the state to do that. You just need to basically have a proper institute to back your play.
Right here.
Yeah, I definitely relate with your story. When I did psilocybin mushrooms, it actually made me honest enough to admit that I had an addiction problem, and I was able to get help. But it wasn't until I fully surrendered to God that I had absolutely no withdrawals, it felt like my neurotransmitters were reset automatically just from full on surrender. But I did ayahuasca prior to this, and it didn't seem like in a proper setting with a shaman and all that good stuff. But in the sharing the next day, it didn't seem like anyone had gotten over their stuff. And these are people that have been there 4 or 5 times. So it seems like Iboga has been more beneficial, because I actually have a friend who runs a center in another country, and it seems like it really does have promising results for people. So I guess my question is, I'm sure that Ibogaine and Iboga is, because it has the properties that are resetting your neurotransmitters, that's not something that is in ayahuasca, is it? Or is it?
Yeah, ayahuasca it works on different receptors, but
Mhm.
it has a similar effect of resetting the kind of your brain chemistry, and the way that it works is it kind of carves different pathways. So there are parts of your brain that normally don't talk to each other, and it helps them communicate better.
Nothing is a silver bullet.
Yeah, of course.
This is a path. It's not about the psychedelics. It's not. It's just a tool. It's about being able to live present fully in your body, in your mind, in your heart. So that takes time to uncover whatever is hiding that. And so if people have gone to 4 ayahuasca ceremonies or 25, it just depends on how much you're willing to look at yourself, the support you're getting, and the people around you that are willing to be true, clear mirrors for you, to be able to work through it. Because if you're not getting the integration support that you need, then you can just fall back into the same patterns.
So we actually showed a movie here last night called Is Your Story Making You Sick? And a lot of what he was talking about was the same thing, but without any sort of drugs. So he put people through a workshop, a 1-year workshop with retreats and trauma, and basically said the same thing, which is that no one path works, and was teaching mindfulness and meditation and art therapy and all these different things to reset those same grooves. So what you're saying is exactly right. There is no one path. And not necessarily, there's other things to look at. I mean, obviously this film is about that, but I think the other reason that she was able to achieve this sobriety was because she did have so much help around her, and so much support. You can't really do this in a vacuum.
No, absolutely.
So earlier someone mentioned, when you were talking about people that have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or something, but someone also mentioned to avoid it if you take SSRI inhibitors.
So, from what I understand, psilocybin is actually maybe the exception to that. But most psychedelics you don't want to mix with your SSRIs or any other medications, and I highly recommend researching. You guys know the hard answer to that?
To my knowledge, you definitely don't want to mix SSRIs with anything that contains an MAOI, like ayahuasca does, for example. I would want to look up hard research before I, answered it one way or another. You probably want to reference like a medical source online. Definitely, it's a hard no with ayahuasca, but I haven't heard with any of the classical psychedelics.
There's actually a chart on.
Sorry, there's actually a gridded out chart that shows all the different types of drugs in combination with each other. I'd only compare one drug to another drug, so it won't compare like 3 or 4 drugs if you were to be doing like a crazy mix that night. But give me a minute, I'll find it online.
It's on Tripsit. Yeah.
So we're about to wrap up. Professor, I just want to mention one thing, that 25 years ago, I was addicted to ecstasy. I was doing every other drug there was, but ecstasy was the only drug I couldn't moderate. And I ended up driving to the Betty Ford Center in my old Volvo and checked in, and fortunately found out after a month of not using anything that fucking reality was a fucking trip. And I've been tripping ever since. Partially because I was able to do everything before I realized that nothing was more Zen-like than anything. I want to ask one last question of everybody up here. What book would you recommend, one book, for people to get a handle on what's going on? Like a spiritual book, a psychological book, a political book?
I'll go
What book
first.
do you love?
I really like Fellowship of a River by Joe Tafur. He's both a medically trained doctor and Amazonian Shipibo trained shaman. And so it's a really beautiful analogy of how these shamanistic, mysterious practices relate to the Western understanding of trauma, of illness, and the correlation between where we store our illnesses in our body and how both sides of the medicine work.
What's the name of the book again?
Fellowship of the River, Joe Tafur.
I think I would have to say, so a doctor was featured in this movie, Dr. Gabor Mate, who works up in Vancouver, and I would recommend In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Dr. Mate because it talks a lot about how trauma forms all the way back to childhood and how most people who are suffering with addiction, it has its roots in trauma, and so to address the issue of addiction, you ultimately have to address the trauma.
Why didn't you ask about movies, man?
Or movie.
Okay, my God.
Requiem for a Dream.
Neurons to Nirvana.
Try and watch that one.
No, honestly, my favorite book on drugs, since it's going to be really out there, it's Dune by Frank Herbert. There's the spice melange, which basically how some parts of society, they have evolved to do these like super race creatures that can like float through deep space and bend it and all. And then there's this war that happens because they're basically fighting over it as a commodity. And if you wanted to go, honestly, I think right now my favorite movie, not on a drug, but just on addiction, is actually Shame. It's a sex addict movie, and it's fucking perfect. So,
I played it for
yeah.
years here. Yeah. Shame. By the Academy Award-winning director, what's his name? He won the award for 12 Years a Slave. Shame. Like something out of
Steve McQueen.
McQueen, yeah.
Steve McQueen.
How do we not know?
Shame. Also. Wow.
Ah.
Okay, good one.
Wrap it up.
I would just recommend anything by Stanislav Grof. I mean, he's a pioneer in the field. He wrote LSD psychotherapy, tons of other great books, and he integrates his work with LSD and different drugs with a lot of psychology, which is great for therapists and lay people as well. So anything by Stanislav Grof.
G-R-O-V?
I'll,
F. Grof.
I'll end here
Stanislav.
with just going and reading poetry, like living and breathing and feeling your heart, and you know, because at some point we just need to stop thinking and just living and connecting with one another. So my favorite book is The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran. So thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah.
There are flyers at the back for Aware Project events and Inner Space events, so check it out. And yeah.
So
If
this
you
is
need
our
a bunch
last
of
night.
stickers,
This
hit us up.
film festival was started by an organization called Writers in Treatment. There's a website, writersinTreatment.org. They give free consultations, free advice, and free referrals regarding this world.
Addiction,
WritersinTreatment.org.
not the psychedelic word.
There's also a volunteer with Bright Pink flyers for our psychedelia integration events that are coming up. We've got a couple of things next week, including there's going to be a lecture on drug interactions between psychotropics and psychedelics, which goes towards your question before. And yeah, you can sign up for our email list. We've got a ton of good stuff going on.
And go to labs.org if you want to contact us regarding the next psychedelic conference, or if you want to get in contact with us for LAMPS, that's lapss.org.
Thank you.
There's something on 11/11 at 11/11. What is that?
Aware Project.
Aware Project. That's a club or
It's a psychedelic society here in Los
psychedelic
Angeles.
society
that
called 11/11.
Ash, yeah.
And there's a place called 11/11.
We're holding an event on November 11th
Yeah.
at a space called 1111 at WeHo. It's a networking, speed dating, psychedelic mixer.
Wow.
If you want to meet your community, we're gonna put you guys into cool groups and make you talk to each other and talk about why you're here and why you care.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, please come.